Good evening. It's Monday, the 2nd of December. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of Rotherham District Council's Audit Committee. I am Councillor Brian Drayson, the Chair of the Committee. We're joined in the chamber this evening by Mr Patrick Farmer, the Committee's independent member, Lorna Ford, Chief Executive, Andrew Vallance, Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 Officer, Gillian McInnes, Interim Head of Planning, Joe Powell, Acting Director of Community, Gary Angel, the Council's Internal Audit Manager, and Anna Everett, Corporate Programme Risk and Improvement Manager. We also have Louise Hollingworth with us from Democratic Services, who's clerk to the committee. Just checking. Right. Online we have Richard Parker Harding, Director of Head of Environment Services, sorry. And also Lisa Cooper from Democratic Services. Right, a reminder to members on using the microphone correctly, please, and they need to speak up so that those watching online or viewing the webcast afterwards can clearly hear what's being said, and I'll try and do it as well. Speaking of clarity, if we do come to a vote, could members please raise their hands clearly when voting and keep them raised until the committee clerk has counted them. Thank you. On to the agenda. Do I have your authority to sign the minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee on the 30th of September as a correct record of the proceedings?
Move approval, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I should have read this first, shouldn't I? I'd just like to bring your attention to highlight the item AS2411, where we resolved to bring a review of the risk register to each meeting. While the principle behind it, i.e. the committee being more proactive in relation to the risk management, is sound, we didn't necessarily think through the conflicting work schedules of the people who have to produce the report for us. So although we have no formal review to consider this evening, Anna Everett, who is the Corporate Programme Risk and Improvement Manager, is in attendance to advise on and pick up any risk-related items that may arise, and I think it's probable that we will get to every other meeting with a formal review of the risk, if that's acceptable. Thank you. Apologies for absence, please, Louise.
An apology received from Councillor Hayward, Chair.
Thank you. Any additional items?
No, there are none.
Right. Disclosures of interest. To receive any disclosures by members of a personal and disclosable pecuniary interest in matters on the agenda. The nature of any interest and whether the member regards the personal interest as prejudicial under the terms of the Code of Conduct. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. Are there any? Councillor Barnes.
Yes, in relation to agenda item 5, since you've circulated a paper from the Northern Parishes Group, I do represent Etchingham Parish Council on that group, although I was not present for any discussion of this paper, and indeed have taken no part in the gestation of this paper.
Thank you, Councillor
My interest is therefore purely personal.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Barnes. Anyone? Councillor Thomas.
Chair of the Housing Company, non-prejudicial.
Right, I'm going to change the order tonight, and I'm going to go to the internal audit, which is agenda item 8, first of all, to hear from Mr Angel on our performances up until the 30th of September. It's probably thrown everyone a bit, but Mr Angel, if you could please.
Thank you, Chair. This is my normal quarterly report to the committee. It gives you reports on the internal audit activity in the second quarter of 2024-25 and the progress made in implementing outstanding audit recommendations. The current position is that despite a major overrun on one report, I'm still hopeful of completing the majority of the, if not all of the audit schedule plan for this financial year. Summary of the audit activity in quarter 2. If you go to paragraph 4 on page 25, you'll see there we issued 5 reports in the second quarter of 2024-25. Executive summaries are reproduced in the Appendix A, which is page 31 onwards. These audits were in states income, land charges, temporary accommodation, bed and breakfast, ICT governance and licensing. All provided good or substantial assurance apart from the estate's income audit, which only received a minimal assurance rating. As usual, the reasons behind the ratings are outlined in the appendix. Members will note that owing to the poor assurance rating given to estate's income review, I have asked management to supply a progress update on the points raised in the audit. These comments are included in the blue box at the end of the executive summary on pages 34 and 35. We plan to carry out a follow-up audit in April 2025 to verify the progress made on the state's income, results of which will be reported back to this committee in June next year. Moving on to implementation audit recommendations on paragraph 26 onwards on page 26. The progress on the outstanding audit recommendations has been followed up and the current position is shown in Appendix B on page 45. Firstly, the old years. The total number of recommendations shown in the old years section at the top of Appendix B has increased this quarter due to the addition of the recommendations made in 2023-24, which was previously at the bottom of the page. However, this therefore masks some of the progress made since the last audit, namely the number of long-standing, that's the pre-2023-24 recommendations, has reduced by 2 from 8 to 6 this quarter, and the recommendations in 2023-24 has reduced by 9 from 16 to 7. This leaves a total of 13 recommendations currently outstanding, all of which are work in progress. On to the current year recommendations. Only one has been implemented, but progress is being made on the majority of the remaining cases. I will shortly be producing a summary of the progress made today on all recommendations over 6 months old for discussion at SLT, as some of these are not progressing as quickly as I would like. I think that's all I need to say on that. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Angel. Let's see. Anyone got a question while I'm searching for my place? Yes, Mr. Biggs. Councillor Biggs.
Sorry, Gary. At our last audit meeting, you said we had debts roughly of about 500,000.
Yeah.
And now we're down to 145,000. Does that mean since our last audit we've collected £355,000?
No, I don't, where is it since 150,000?
145.
45.
Number 3, 11.2, section 3.
Not quite sure. Oh no, that's talking about seal arrears.
Is that still okay?
That's solely only seal. No, I think if anything, it's got worse.
Okay.
Can I just mention that on seal arrears? I know there was a comment on here about possibly not being able to have the report we sort of hoped for. I can't find that now at the moment. But of course, worrying that if we don't collect the seal, the parishes don't get the money either. Is that right?
In terms of that aspect of the report, when the seal money is collected automatically after each time period, 6 months period, the money would be passed to the parishes. And yes, if we haven't collected the money, they will not receive the money due to them. However, it is very difficult when it comes to seal in terms of a moment in time, because 1 week we might have arrears of 250, and the next week we might have arrears of 50,000. Whereas because it's an ongoing, constant, issuing of invoices for payment. So in terms of the overall proposal in relation to reporting back on where we are, and the balance of officer time, it's proposed that we would do that annually so that you would get the overall picture for the year rather than a moment in time which might be quite misleading.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I think what was worrying us, Chairman, at the last meeting was a figure really, and even now it's still 145,000. It seemed to us that this justified some special attention, given our need for income at the moment. And indeed, in terms of the planning department, I know that charges are going to go up for planning, but we do find difficulty in staffing our planning department. Income is valuable to us at the moment, and therefore we were a bit worried at the amount of SIL that hadn't been collected. Even now, it's these slightly vague sentences that are left hanging in the air. Total does not include the potentially fraudulent cases under consideration. How many? How much is involved? This is the sort of fact that the Audit Committee needs to know to be able to assess the risk to this authority.
Chair.
Yes.
In terms of one of the concerns that was raised at the last committee was about the resources that were available to collect and pursue more SIL cases. And since that time, the senior leadership team have agreed 0.5 of a post specifically for SIL and also 0.5 of a post for monitoring of Section 106 to pick up another item that you have been looking at over a period of time. And in terms of how many cases, it is the fact that up until now we haven't had the resources to check whether, for example, a self-build scheme is truly a self-build scheme. And so that is the resource that we have secured would be looking at those cases. In terms of the sum of 145, which was that moment in time, we are working with the legal services to pursue some cases. SIL is a complex beast, and there is no doubt that we need, significant legal assistance to do it. Having more people on that side of things wouldn't make a difference, but having an additional resource to check those schemes and make sure that the measurements and doing some spot checks would be very useful.
Thank you, Gillian. Mr. Farmer.
Mr. Chairman, as your independent person, I hope you don't mind if I speak very frankly to what I see in these papers, particularly the audit reports that Gary's done. The estate's income audit, if I add up the figures, I think it's about 127,000 that hasn't been collected from a council that is desperately short of money and trying to make savings. If I look at what the head of service states, he says that he came in April 2023, some 18 months ago, and identified the issues that Gary's now brought before us. So what has he been doing in the last 18 months? I think the Audit Committee, the main job of the Audit Committee is to hold management to account. And I have to say, this seems to me a clear failure of oversight by management to allow a situation like this to go on for so long and to be found to be in a pretty parlous state. The Audit Committee really ought to be censoring management on this subject because clearly it has failed in its duty to have clear oversight on a department like this and this amount of income. So I hope you don't mind me speaking frankly, Chairman, but I think that is what the committee should be considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. That's what you're here for. In fact, you beat me just before I was going to say I was going to move on to the audit because I didn't want Mr. Powell to think he was getting away scot-free. But Mr. Powell,
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your comments. I agree that the challenge that we've had with the estates service is that the issues and challenges we've found are long-standing and systemic and have taken a long time to identify. It would be, I can see in how the sentence is structured, it's perhaps misleading. The full extent of the issues with the estate service, like any management approach, weren't fully apparent, and that happened and emerged over time, particularly when a key officer left the organisation and two key officers managers left the organisation, and we were able to get under the bonnet of the scale of the challenges. But I think I would match the strength of your comments in terms of my experience of the level of underinvestment in what is a key service for the council over years. And I would defend the management team and senior leadership that have come in to try and identify and resolve this issue, and the amount of resources that the senior leadership team has endorsed is testament to how seriously they've taken it as it's emerged. But I do, in the testimony there in the report, it is a little misleading. It gives the impression it became apparent on walking in, but it's been more of a 6 to 12 month establishing the full extent of the challenges and issues. And since our consultant joined us about 6 to 9 months ago, we've brought in an additional surveyor, we've brought in an additional facilities manager, we've brought in a commissioned, which takes time through procurement, we've commissioned a stock condition, stock evaluation, we've commissioned a new software system. We don't really have a proper software system to even identify the scale of the problem. So I would counter that this committee over a long time, and the audits that have come through, Gary, this isn't new information, and how we can demonstrate to you the improvements going forward with a new metric that I've established for the performance of the service, which is counterintuitive to me to understand why this hasn't previously been a metric of this council, to see how it can improve its income position rather than measuring the income it projects it will receive. I've heard Councillor Barnes articulate this very well himself in previous discussions, and now we have that metric to grow the income. It really puts a focus on the team to make sure that we're maximising income that's due. And so, in summary, a good point, well made, and I agree with you 100%, but I wanted to reassure this committee and you that we're doing everything we can to improve the situation, and the resources are being brought to bear to improve the position. Thank you, Chair.
Bond, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Of the 127,000, how much of that will be recovered, and in what timescale?
Those funds are dispersed over quite a range of different scenarios. We have already resolved the issue of that was established at Beeching Road, which was identified. So that's been recouped and it's on a payment plan presently. We foresee within the next 6 months to be in a much better position on those various aspects. There's quite a number of issues that were identified, but I hope in the comments and the commentary it's given some reassurance in terms of what we brought in, but it's challenging to give you a specific response on each. But be assured, I think in 3 to 6 months we'll be in a position where the estate is fully appraised, the leases are fully appraised, the stock condition is fully appraised, and we have everything in one software system, so we can actually pull these issues into more of a coherent and more of a controlled management situation than it is presently.
Thanks, Chair. So we were talking about this issue earlier on when we met, and it is, you know, I echo the concern of Mr. Farmer, and but from what you're saying, Joe, there's an increased sense of management grip, oversight, and awareness and commitment to resolving the issue, and you know what the issues are, you recognise what they are, The IT system, the lack of an IT system is a worry, isn't it? So that's a key, presumably that's a key part of starting to put things right. And there is a group already meeting to get sort of management, insight into resolving these issues. And the point made as well in Gary's report about staff turnover in the estates team and resourcing issues. My queries were, can we would a specific presentation to an audit committee be useful, or a report, the progress, the sort of trajectory of this group, the group that's been set up to have oversight of the issues, and maybe generally around the commercial acumen of the council, and an improving picture on whether it's to do with assets, realising assets, and in this case getting real grip and direction over the income and debt realisation, as well as what was the other thing that was in my head just then? And then the other aspect is the staff recruitment and retention. Is the new settlement making a difference to that, and are there opportunities to focus on that? Because whoever we employ to do this job, we're going to get income. They're going to make their salary back at least. So that has to be part of resolving this issue. So would a presentation be useful, a report to this committee?
I think it would be but I'll ask the Chief Exec to respond.
Thank you, Chair. I think it would. I wonder whether a member briefing might be the place to do that. And if you want to bring things back to this committee, then you can do so. But I think it'd be good for members to have a bit of an update. Making most of our assets is one of the 4 priorities in our Fit for the Future programme. So, it has been prioritised. And I think actually I'd like to mention Joe, because Joe has done an absolutely brilliant job in getting to grips with something that was a complete mess, if I'm completely honest. It was been a service that has been under-resourced for many, many years. It lacked any policy, it lacks information, it lacks systems, and Joe came along and got a grip on that. And I think 18 months to do that and have a way forward and put the strategic asset management plan in place. We're now working through the disposals policy. I think that is an absolutely amazing achievement. We have been really blessed with some of the people that have come to support us with that. So Will Wright, I don't know if you've met Will, but actually you talk about people paying for himself, well, 10 times over. And I really think it would be good for members to hear from Will in the work that he has been doing. But recruitment and retention is a real problem. And obviously we've had our people strategy, and we now go into our workforce planning stage of that strategy. And I have to say that Joe's coming up with creative solutions to try and, we are a bit dependent on interims and consultants, and that's something that we can't afford in the long term. And he's been looking at creative solutions with neighbouring councils to try and reduce the costs there, but get the people of the quality that we need to come in and support us. So this is a problem across the sector. This isn't just Rother. This is across the board. So, I'm actually really pleased with the progress we've made under this strand of Fit for the Future. And I'm also pleased with the way we're getting to grips. So the corporate working at Rother is really improving, and a really good example of that is the work that Anna has been pulling together on debt collection. And I wonder whether Anna actually wanted to come in and just update the committee on how that's going.
I was just going to invite her.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Chair.
Yeah, very briefly, Gary mentions it in his report. We've pulled together a group of officers from across the district, looking at all of the different component parts to how we've got the debt and the whole debt accrual and recovery process. We've had 3 meetings already, and I'm very, very grateful to Steve, who works on Gary's team, because we've used all the work that Audit did on discovering the problem and working out what it was. So we're trying to come up with the solutions at the moment. It's quite a classic project or a classic problem because it doesn't just cover one aspect. It covers people issues, process issues, accountability issues. It covers just about everything that you can imagine, and what I would call quite a nice project, but it isn't going to be quick to fix. So what we're looking at is a series, like a phased approach to being able to sort it out, looking at the historic debt, looking at trying to stop the new debt accruing, and there'll be a lot of changes to how people work. So we've only had 3 meetings. We've made a lot of progress in those 3 meetings, and we've got them scheduled for every fortnight. I'll be taking this to the Corporate Programme Board so that the Corporate Programme Board can monitor the progress. But it really, I don't want to stress enough that it isn't a quick fix, but we should be able to put some things in place on a staged approach. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I'll come to Councillor Thomas first because he's been waiting, but then Councillor Barnes, I'm sure, has got a question for you, Anna. Councillor Thomas.
Chair, I'd like to start by saying that I am confident that the situation in relation to all of these matters will improve, partly because we've got a very determined and effective Chief Executive. We've got new ideas on management structure, and we've got high-quality staff dealing with the problems. So I'm quite confident that things will improve. But I would just like to say something about the presentation of the report. Normally, I'm very, very happy with Gary Angel's work. It's superlative. But in this case, I think it could be improved in one very simple way. I would like to have seen a simple list of all the recommendations that Gary made, the historic ones and long-standing ones, which apparently are still, in many cases, not yet addressed, the more recent ones, and precisely, absolutely precisely, what is being done in relation to them, rather than a kind of generalised statement that progress is being made. That would put us all on this committee in a position to evaluate the work that's being done, to praise what is good, to understand what's going on, and to see where there may be issues which need to be addressed there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Angel.
Yes, thank you for those comments. I just like to point out that in Appendix B, I've gone into more depth than probably ever have done on the outstanding recommendations. I know it doesn't go to the nth degree, but I'm trying to give you the feel of things that are moving and things that are not, and why. Obviously, I can always improve on that. But
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I think Councillor Thomas said much of what I would want to say. I think a report back would be extraordinarily helpful. I think we need to know also how far we're making progress with replacing interims with permanent appointments. Clearly, everybody will be involved in the budget in the next few months. But I would have thought when Joe has been in post for a couple of years, somewhere around about that time, coming back to the committee with a detailed report, but going wider than just Joe's responsibilities. I think it would be useful to talk about the whole of debt collection, arrears collection, because clearly this was a mess. It's always difficult when you're criticising people who have long gone, but quite clearly what Joe took over didn't exist. We're building a new system. It'll take a little time to suggest it's robust, but 2 years in would be a good moment for the committee to review, and we can look at the same time at the work Anna is doing. And maybe we could have a snapshot of SIL at that point. I take Gillian's point that it will be a snapshot. It can't be as accurate a picture as one on the other 2 aspects. But nevertheless, it will be useful to know a bit more about whether we're having problems on SIL. I hope by then some of our resource problems in terms of staffing may be remedied partly by our own salary settlement, but also to some extent more realistic charges for planning, which the government does intend to bring in.
Thank you. I know at one point we were thinking about asking for Gary to look at the recommendations on this particular one, the estate's income review, in 4 or 5 months ago, or for June's meeting to come back to us. But there was also an idea of looking at debt recovery generally, but I think that might be almost too much for Gary, because that's what Anna's group's doing. So I'm not sure where that. But then also Anna said she's getting a lot of help from Gary's team. So so at some point next in the new civic year, we'd like an update on how the debt recovery generally is going, and specifically on the estate's income, I think, because even on the one on the land charges, the one that's provisional, or sorry, what's the P stand for? It's not provisional. P, partially met, is on collecting. It's on collecting the fees. So there's a theme, and the last couple of meetings, I think each time we've had a query over debt collection, and we've said, please employ someone to earn their own wages plus back. So I think it's going in the right direction. We just need an update in the new civic year on where it's going, and wish you well on it. Has anyone got anything? Yes, Gary.
Yeah, I've already thinking about maybe doing a review specifically of corporate debt collection, as opposed to looking at what the Revenue Bennett's team do, because they did it. Because really, our debtors report was a review of the administration of the debt system. Of course, they need the support of the departments to collect the debt. So I was thinking of doing a corporate one, which I report to SLT, of what we think the current state of the play is. That would probably all be quite good timing when we get a new head of finance or whatever. And so it might, with better luck, it'll give us a checklist of what needs to be fixed. So,
well, if SLT tell you to do it, we'll have a copy as well, please. You can bring it to this meeting as well. Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Biggs.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose my anxiety is that if you read through the reasons why this, that or the other hasn't yet been done or not been thoroughly done, it's often because of staffing issues, financial issues, and it's very clear it's not a question of bad people or inefficient people, it's good people doing their best with limited resources. I think that's the key to it. But the anxiety must be, if we're not able to actually make progress with our own audit, to what extent is the council falling behind with all its other functions? If we can't even actually do what our own councillors are asking us to do, our own auditor is doing, how much is the work of the council in general being hampered? I think that's a reason for giving as much priority as possible to the work of the audit committee, so we're in a position to actually assess how well the council is functioning under strains not of its own making.
Thank you, Chair. It's an interesting question. I think we have other things in place, Overview and Scrutiny Committee and its role in looking at performance and the quarterly reports there. And it is really important that we're measuring the right things to really demonstrate that we are, what our performance is like. So at the moment, I think we kind of look at things that you'd expect a council to report, but I'd really like to get under the hood of that and really look at the areas that we're not doing so well at, and bring those into the fore as well, and make sure that we're not, we're looking at performance in the round. At SLT, we have something called Performance Board, where we have a deeper look into the service, and obviously through processes like the service planning process, which is about to kick off. That's another place where we can look at what's going on in a service. So that's really important that those processes are still there. But I accept that doesn't necessarily always come into the member domain. So I think that's something we can work on and make sure we're actually we're measuring the things that matter, and it's easy to fall into the trap of just just looking at the things that you always look at. So we need to challenge that, and I think that is the report goes up to Overview and Scrutiny in January, I think, that looks at that.
Of course, just before I come to Councillor Biggs and Councillor Barnes, in fact, I'll come to Councillor Biggs because what I was going to say has gone straight out of my brain. Councillor Biggs.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to what's been said, and it's good that things are being put in place, but the problem I have with my parishioners is we've got a consultation with the budget and with car parking charges. And it's very difficult for me to justify that when I look at the debts we've got, the 272,000 plus the fraudulent cases that we don't know how much is worth. If the £500,000 is still outstanding, what Gary said, it's very difficult for me to justify the consultation about people putting stuff on it, because that's the thing I'm getting. All I'm getting from my parishioners is you've got all this outstanding money that you're owed, why don't you collect that first? So until we can actually, in layman's terms perhaps, get the reasons what we are actually doing to try and recover that debt, these questions are going to keep being asked by my parishioners, and it's very difficult for me to give them a good answer.
Thank you. If you want to respond, yes.
I think it's a balance of all of these things. Income generation is part of that budget setting process. Obviously, we're consulting at the moment, and we'll listen to the views that come back in. And I accept that. I didn't realise that's something that you hear a lot about. It's interesting that is discussed. But I think we have to have a balanced approach, and we have to look at all the different ways we can get income into the council. I don't know exactly what's going to come back on that consultation, but we will listen to it, and I do agree that what we've talked about this evening is all part of that picture. But I don't think we can delay one aspect of it whilst another one gets sorted out. Kind of have to use all the tools in the box, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Just before I come to Councillor Barnes, I remember what I was going to say, which was on Councillor Thomas's point and Chief Exec's responses. Of course, Gary in internal audit is our operational arm. He is the person that goes to look at bits we want to look at. So there are occasions when I think we need to say to Gary, I know you've got that one planned perfectly, but guess what? We want you to do this instead, because he is our operational arm at looking at various bits. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I think we ought also to recognise what goes well. So I think we ought to take note of the very satisfactory position on the ICT audit. Also the very interesting verdict on licensing, which is substantial, even though each of the individual objectives aren't met. I was convinced by Gary's reasoning, but one thing did trouble me, because it's about the public face of the council, and that is the fact that the information on the website 8 months in is still wrong. We really do ourselves no service if we don't actually keep the website up in date so that people do know that they're paying the right sum, particularly if they pay online. And we're talking about active alcohol premises. Bit of a bind that it has to be done annually, but I understand why that is. But it does mean that we do need to get the website accurate.
I think it was also referenced and made there that on some applications online, the price on the website is the price they pay. So if it's the wrong price, they're paying too little. They're paying the wrong price because it hasn't been updated on the online system. I don't know who... Oh, sorry, I've just excited Mr. Angel.
I was just going to say that we don't know. I don't know for a fact that the prices are still wrong on the website. I mean, it was wrong at the time we did the audit. I got the impression they were going to be sorted fairly quickly. So, I mean, I haven't got an update for you, but I would hope that they've been sorted. And yet, the people can only pay what the drop down lets them pay on the website. So, if it's wrong on the website, they're going to pay the wrong amount. We're not talking about substantially less than what it should be, because the fees didn't go up by very much, but we are losing out on it, yeah.
Yeah, well, Can I just say that also comes back, of course, to the bit on the estate things where there were 24 rent reviews that were sort of out of date and 21 leases had expired. So it all adds up, and they might not be individually major bits, but they are getting, they all add up. So I'll just come to Mr. Parker Harding, who's put his hand up, and then I'll come to Councillor Delaney. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reassure members that as soon as the issue with the wrong fees being on the website was pointed out to us, they were immediately updated. So they were updated at the same time we received the report from internal audit. And just because when we have when people pay online, the fees they paid online were correct. It was just that the fees in the tables on the website was incorrect. So we shouldn't have lost any money if people paid online. But the fees are now correct on the website.
Thank you, Mr. Parker Harding. Another example of internal audit working. Thank you. Councillor Delaney.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I did query some of the fees that the licensing team had for pest control during the week, and I was told to email in because they needed updating still. So I think there is still some fees on the public-facing website that need to be updated. I haven't looked at them today, but they did need updating during the week.
Yeah, I think you've got a willing recipient of that email in Mr. Parker Harding.
That's very good.
Councillor McGurk.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a question about the estates team that was mentioned in the report I referred to before that had problems with recruitment and retention. Is that the same team who should be engaging with Britannia, the owners of Pontins, in Canberra?
Yep, I'll take that, Chair. Yeah, we are actively engaged with Britannia. It is the same team. It's not through lack of trying in that instance, though, because we've had agents employed because coincidentally the leases were also coming to a termination or renegotiation point. So it's not been through a lack of trying on our part, but we've had assistance from the local MP to broker a discussion, which will be forthcoming, yeah. So we're positive news to that extent, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Biggs.
Yeah, just one question I'm reading here regarding licences to alcohol premises. It says here that it's currently not possible to give an assurance that all live alcohol premises are being sent annual bill. So if they haven't paid the bill for their licence and their licence has run out, are they operating legally?
We can't say that any haven't paid the licence. We're not sure on that. There was way more invoices sent out than there are premises to licence. So I suspect there's some old information in the system there, possibly a legacy from when they upgraded the computer system from one thing to another. But we couldn't say we can give you assurance it's all right because we couldn't check it. But there's way more invoices going out than there are premises. It may be that some people, the ownership of the premises has changed, but they're still paying the invoice that comes there to the old people. Don't know. Richard's team is going to try and look at it, but it's not easy to reconcile, unfortunately. They're going to have to get lists out of two different systems and try and tie it up, but they're working on it.
Thank you. I doubt if we'd have made money, but possibly people would have paid extra. Right. There's no other point on this one. It's obviously there was a lot in this report. We've highlighted, and I take the point that there are positives in there. We've sort of stayed on the minimal one and picked on that one, and the very real problem of debt collection or debt recovery, which the SLT are determined to deal with. So I said there was a lot else. We've read the report, and this is actually just for us to resolve that we note Gary's report for the 30th of September. So do we note that report, please? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. Right, so now we'll go back to the agenda in its correct order, and agenda item 5, which are proposed changes to the public speaking scheme at the Planning Committee.
Can I redeclare, Chairman?
Yes, thank you. This is a report from Gillian McInnes, the interim head of planning, and I think I'll ask her to introduce it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can start by identifying the background paper, which is a summary report of a review of the Planning Committee that was undertaken in October of last year. Prior to me being interim head of planning, I was appointed to review the Planning Committee by the Chief Executive, which I did in October of last year. It involved interviewing a number of relevant people and also attending the Planning Committee in person and reviewing online committees. Following that, there is the summary report of the review, and that identified a number of issues and a number of actions, including the action to address the public speaking scheme, and also another report which I believe will go to Council in relation to the size of the committee, but tonight we are here for the public speaking scheme. So just for your background is, I was appointed as a consultant because my background is working for the Planning Advisory Service and the Local Government Association, and do a lot of reviews of planning services and planning committees. And in undertaking this review, I identified, in relation to the Planning Committee, the basis of determining planning applications, identifying the issues like ensuring that decisions were made on the behalf of the whole district and that were made reviewing the planning decision-making framework. The actions that were identified were that the proposal should amend the public speaking scheme, removing questioning. The aim was to reduce the length of the committee and ensure that members and officers are not overly fatigued when making decisions, to ensure that there was a better balance of views, because when the review took place there was very clearly an imbalance in relation to the times apportioned to the objectors and supporters, and that the questioning of the speakers was often not focused on the speech that had been given. Councillors would expand into other areas. It meant that it was very difficult to manage the committee and resulted in high risk introducing new issues that were not necessarily material to the decision making, putting the robust decision-making process in danger. Also, that members often treated the speakers during the question time as experts and non-bias experts. However, the only people that are in the committee that are not biased are the members of the committee itself and the planning officers that are employed to advise them in relation to the planning decision-making framework, that being the law, government policy and case law, and also local plan policies and neighbourhood plan policies. So in terms of the proposal that is in front of you today for your consideration in advance of going to Council, the proposal is to reduce the public speaking to essentially 3 minutes, and the proposal is in Appendix B, so 3 minutes for each party with the exception of very large applications, and that would result in speakers for 12 minutes from all applications with the exception of 18 minutes for the large applications, and then followed by a debate in comparison to what you have at present, which in Appendix A, you'll see the final column indicates that you've got 20, 30 and 40 minutes of presentation of speakers, followed then by questions which can often take as long, if not longer, than the speakers themselves, and followed by debate. So the proposal is to address the amount of speaker time, to remove the questioning, to avoid the significant risks, and to improve the effectiveness of the committee and ensuring robust and defensible decision making in the planning context. I would also say, Chairman, as I'm sure you are aware, this report was discussed and the planning committee were consulted upon it, and the planning committee supported the proposal unanimously. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McGurk, the first question.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not on the planning committee. I've never been to the planning committee, so I know there's a strict legal framework that applies to it. So please tell me if my question is betrays my ignorance. But it seems that the need is for a proportionate approach that's defensible, that supports robust decision making, that doesn't place the council in a place of risk, and puts it at risk of making the wrong decision. So would a more proportionate approach be limiting, and this might not be permitted, but would it be more proportionate to limit members, the length of time members speak for? If that, because it sounds like the length of the debate, because the more you get into debate and detail and this kind of thing, the more you raise the opportunity for straying from the framework and becoming less defensible. So, is that an option to consider, rather than in addition to, or rather than, or in addition to managing contributions from the public in a more in a more consistent way?
Just before you come to that, I should have made it quite clear, and I should have declared an interest in that I'm chair of the planning committee, which is why I won't say too much tonight on it, but because I can see possibly the answer coming this way as it's down to the chairman. So I'm just making that clear. Thank you.
I mean, potentially you could limit the councillors on the committee. It's not something I would suggest is, well, I wouldn't suggest it. It isn't something I would recommend. I think it's the issues are more, that I witnessed, because as I say, I watched committees before forming my recommendations, was the amount of speakers and the unbalanced issue of speakers, because you would get numerous speakers speaking against, for example, and then also the parish council potentially speaking against, and then you would get a ward member speaking against, and you would have one applicant speaking for. So you can see the imbalance straight away. Now, you can't go over that totally, because I would imagine, you're always going to want the parish council to be a speaker, and they will either go for or against. But to have, the same amount of time in the for and against, as in the objector and usually the applicant, is much more balanced. It also is where there are so many speakers, and the questioning, I'm slightly concerned about conflating the two issues, because in a way there's two questions, one about the amount of time for speakers, but also there is the questions. The questioning is highly concerning. I mean, witnessing the questions and how that operated in real life, and also now being part of it and seeing how it operates, it's very difficult for it not to result in a toing and froing, and also the introduction of things that are not material. And yes, the comments that you may have received and I have received is that the chair could address that, or officers could tell the chair. But actually, the flow of the meeting then becomes even more interrupted. So I would say I wouldn't recommend limiting the members of the committee, because they are the decision makers. They are the ones that need to be sure that they have all the information they require. But what I would say is that the questioning brings nothing to it except risk, and also has the danger of the members of the committee treating those people that are speaking, that they're questioning, as experts, whereas they are all biased. Every one of them is biased, and I saw a comment about them not being biased. You have if you're a speaker, you're coming to speak because you have a view, and therefore you're automatically biased. So I wouldn't limit the councillors. There is the aspect in the report about managing the meeting and not only allowing them to speak once after the motion has been moved, but not limiting the debate.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby-Green, I have seen you. I'm going to go for the committee members first, then I'll come to you, and I think Councillor Mear may also wish to say something, but I have seen you and I will come to you. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, Gillian has just said something quite important. You are going to structure the discussion at committee so that although a member may speak more than once after the motion is moved, normal council procedure rules will apply. That seems to me quite sensible, because once you've got the motion, then I think you're in a more formal debate situation. I've reflected long and hard about this, Chairman, because one of the major time-consuming factors at planning committees that I've attended, I'm a reserve member, but I sometimes come along and sit in the audience, is the amount of time actually the officers take to present, because they can't be sure that the members have read the papers, being quite blunt. If one actually took a stopwatch to it, I think we would find the major contributor to length is, in fact, the officer presentation at the beginning. I don't criticising that. I do understand exactly why that is so. We introduced, it was a major innovation after the 29 election, public speaking. I think it's right to reflect on what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I agree with Gillian. I think that the question time is, at times it has been abused, at times it has really become part of the debate. I think actually it gets out of control very easily, and I don't think it adds a great deal of value. I'll be quite honest about that. I think, too, there is something to be said for reducing the number of speakers on most applications. I'll come back to major in a moment. So I think that too, we could go forward with a slimmed down situation as in Appendix B and have a look at this after perhaps 6 months or perhaps longer, 10 months of experiencing a new system to see if it really achieves the end we're talking about. I think the change that gives me most pause, and the one which actually I think most public speakers who are not as used to public speaking as we are would find the 3-minute limit too short. And to be honest, if you've got as few speakers as you've got, you're not really going to save a lot of time by moving from 5 to 3. And I think in some ways, 5 minutes is an appropriate time for somebody to make a case. I think 3, people would tend to rush, stumble. The more experienced people would be okay, but I suspect a lot of the people, not speaking for the parish, but both for and against, are not used to public speaking in quite the same way. So I think I would be very hesitant about changing 5 to 3 minutes. The other one which really worries me is the definition of major. Frankly, if we ever saw a 100-house application in the AONB, I would be extremely surprised. The largest I think I can ever remember in the AONB is 50, and that was an exception. So I really think we do need to think what we mean by major. I'm sure 10 was too low in the original scheme. I would have thought we're talking more in the AONB about 30. I won't presume to comment on what it should be in the urban areas. But I would have thought 30 was a reasonable figure for a major application out in the sticks. Those are my major points. I haven't many questions. I agree with the direction of travel that Gillian's trying to achieve, but I think actually we're going too far in those couple of respects.
Thank you. I'll come to Gillian, I think, to explain, because it actually says large major. So it's changed major, which was 10 plus, to a large major, which is 100 plus dwellings or the equivalent in commercial space. But I'll come to Gillian on that.
Chairman, if I can also comment, in my report I also commented that some of the officer presentations were too long. There was one that I watched in particular that I thought was never ending. So, I think that is something that does need to be addressed, but I do think they're extremely important to ensuring that the whole of the committee are on the same page in terms of what the proposal is that's in front of them and the main issues for consideration. In terms of the large major, there is obviously a matter of judgment as to where you put that. I would say that it should be very unusual that an application comes to the committee, so hence the 100, but maybe it should be 300. So it's not that it would be a matter of course. The other question might be, do you need to have another category, or would you have just all applications being the same, and only for the most extraordinary ones the chairman might use their discretion. But I would think that 30 dwellings, particularly in the world of the new government, is a very low number, and that would result in quite a lot of applications falling within that category. In terms of the amount of minutes, I understand that comment. I would say that I think most people can make a fairly concise comment on or presentation on that in 3 minutes. And in fact, I often witness the fact that particularly inexperienced people end up sort of just waffling on at the end, rather than actually having anything much to say because their time period hasn't finished yet. But I don't know if there's anything else, Chair, that you want me to comment on.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing I want to be clear on, and I'm not at the moment, is how exactly this would work in practice. Can I first just say that I do like your report in the sense that it's clear, it's comprehensive, it's decisive. I think it's a good thing to keep things under review. But I will be saying quite fundamentally that I don't share some of the absolutely basic assumptions of this report. I don't share the division which we had in the training between, on the one hand, objected officers and, on the other hand, biased residents. I think it's really important. I also would like to say, before I go any further, that I just want to say something about myself, which is that some people, when they're young, they go and they see an opera and say, I want to become an opera singer. They go and see a ballet and say, I want to become a dancer. I'm weird. And so when I was young, I read On Liberty by John Stuart Mill, and it changed my life. It was like a spotlight had been shone upon the world. And it changed me. It determined the course of my life. And so I've always been a tremendous libertarian, a great believer in free speech, the importance of debate, analysis, evaluation, digging and probing. That's what I think good decision-making needs. And if you have those things, the result is better decision-making than you would have otherwise. And so I come from the idea that we need to encourage as much debate as we possibly can, as much presentation of factual information as we can possibly muster. And I come with huge respect for the people who state their own experience. I believe experience is a very valuable kind of expertise. If you live next door to a brickworks for 365 days a year, you know far more about the operation of that brickworks than people who come in and do a survey for about a week when conditions might be extremely unusual and they might be favourable and the brickworks might not be operating normally and so on. I have great respect for ordinary people. They know about things that people sitting in offices often don't know. And therefore I think we should listen to them very carefully and with great respect, and more than we do, not less, more. I think we could have had more from the residents in the case of the brickworks application about what it was like in terms of dust, noise, pollution, etc. They encountered it, they experienced it, that was their lives. And I think it's also a principle of us as humane people, as humanists. It's for us to believe in the expertise of all people. They all have something of great value to contribute. And so that's the first thing that I want to say. The second thing I want to say is that the idea there is such a thing as being unbiased is completely for the birds, because the system isn't unbiased. It's called a tilted balance. By definition, a tilted balance isn't a balance. It's a balance that has been introduced in order to give a priority, I'm not saying it's the wrong priority, to development over the continued use of land as it has been used beforehand. And we find that decisions change. So, for example, once it was the decision of officers that we shouldn't build on Turkey Road because it was next to a brickworks. Then without anything changing at all, it became the opinion of the officer that we should build. Now that's because of the change of values, the change of priorities. And these things are not objective. And when we finally make a decision, I'm going to recommend this or I'm not going to recommend it, that decision is a subjective decision where you weigh one thing against another. There's no mathematical formula that says you come down on this side or on that side. There's no logical reasoning that says this way or the other. A person makes a balance. And these are all, I think, perfectly normal human activities. So I think we as members of the Planning Committee or whatever, we should be approaching with an attitude of, well, on the one hand, of some respect for what is being said by everybody. And I think it's important to say that an organisation like the Spindlewood Action Group developed a huge amount of expertise amongst themselves and a huge range of arguments you couldn't possibly compress into 5 minutes or 10 minutes. They built up a very well-argued case that deserved to be presented in depth and in detail and to be listened to on that basis. So that, and I also think that it's up to us to devise a system which I agree, we don't want to be wearying people, we don't want to make it excessively long or causing a decision to be made on the grounds of weariness. Come on, let's make a decision. What we want to have is a system that is more efficient. It seems to me an awful lot of the problems that are described here are problems that could be addressed by better chairing, better training. A lot of the problems in those early cases were because of the inexperience of councillors. And I think these problems can be addressed by addressing problems of chairing, problems of presentation, helping people who are going to present to the Planning Committee with their submissions so they are as concise and as relevant as they can possibly be. I think there's a complete approach to be made which would improve the efficiency of the Planning Committee, but without sacrificing democracy and debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I come to Gideon, I would just point out 96% of planning applications are dealt with by delegation anyway. And so all those groups, all those people who've submitted comments, they've all been taken care of. And even the 4% that come to Planning Committee most don't have public speakers. They don't have people saying, I'd like to speak. So I just want, there's not a huge undemocratic system about trying to control the number of speakers, but I take your point. Yeah. Well, but then how long do you give a controversial one, and when does it become controversial? Because we could be sitting here, well, we did say we could have a weekend planning committee. Gillian.
Chairman, as you're aware, I do a great deal of training of planning committees and councillors on planning matters, and one of the, and also parish councils, and one of the ongoing issues is the lack of understanding in terms of the narrowness of the planning decision-making framework, and that you must make decisions as a local planning authority within that framework. And therefore, in terms of the issues of debate, they must stay within that framework. And when you say everybody is an expert, well, they're an expert in where they live, or they're an expert in their immediate environment, but they're not a highways expert or an environmental health expert in relation to where they, are in relation to a proposal. They're not an expert in relation to the planning application, in relation to where they live, and in relation to the evidence and the specialisation of a particular consultee, for example. And there is a huge risk to the council that if you think it is possible to make decisions outside that planning decision-making framework, and that you can take into account all matters that are not, in that framework, then you will end up going to appeal and potentially losing that appeal, because, as I say, there are so many experts that feed into and provide evidence that is the form of, that is put into the reports that go before members. And the members of the planning committee, I think, are quite aware of that, and do understand and stay within their decision-making framework. But there is at times with the speakers, and particularly the questioning, where it starts to veer off into non-material matters and is very difficult to pull back, and does result in a potential risk to the council in relation to non-material unlawful decision-making.
Thank you. I'd also like to point out the review did actually identify the need for training and for chairing appropriately. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief, but first of all, thank you very much for your report, Gillian. I do agree the Planning Committee does desperately need some order. But just...
Councillor, can I ask you to speak up, because we haven't got the loop system yet,
sorry.
And some members are struggling. Thank you.
I'm just thanking Gillian for her report, and I'm saying that the Planning Committee does desperately need bringing into some kind of shape. It does go on and on and on many times, but I take your words that the officers do give presentations, but I think the officers are in a difficult position, because many times members ask questions that show that they haven't read the reports and waste time by this. I've been on the Planning Committee, I think, for over 4 years now, and I think my wish really is that we say to all members, you must take the time to read these reports thoroughly, and if you don't have the time to do that, then maybe you shouldn't be on the planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray.
Oh, Chair. Yes, I had been going to say that Councillor Barnes had stolen my thunder and had said nearly everything that I was going to say, but quite a bit's happened in the meantime, so I'll make one or two observations. The first one is about public speakers, and I speak for the sake of people listening in, if there are members of the public, as a member of the Planning Committee and a former chair of the Planning Committee, and I've been on the Planning Committee since 2019. I find the public speaking system very valuable indeed. I think the speakers can really bring something to life, and they can really bring local knowledge. As Councillor Thomas says, they can bring a great deal of local knowledge, and I know that it all has to be in their written submissions first, but there's a huge difference between hearing from somebody verbally and just seeing dry words. In fact, it's very difficult to read all the public comments on our website because they're not numbered or dated. The name of the person submitting the comment isn't given, and so you don't know which one you've read and which one you haven't. And if there's a list of 60, you really have no chance of being able to go through them in a methodical order. And I hope that the system will be improved for that. But yes, and this public speaking system is also important because the planning committee is the shop window of the council when it comes to planning. And it has done a great deal to engender public confidence in the system. And people have said this to me afterwards, that they came away from meetings because they'd been able to speak, because they'd been able to listen to the debate, and they felt they had a greater degree of confidence in the planning system from having had that opportunity. As to whether it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes, I think Councillor Barnes is right. That's not going to make a great deal of difference. But the number of speakers will make a difference. And I take all those points about major applications. That all needs to be considered. Biased speakers, I don't know that there's really a difference of principle between Gillian McInnes and myself on this, or terminology. Well, of course, a speaker comes with a point of view, but it doesn't mean the point of view is wrong. It doesn't mean it's inaccurate. It doesn't mean it hasn't considered all the relevant issues. A speaker can be coming from a point of view and bring a great deal of material assistance to the committee. As to the overall time taken with applications, I think we have to remember that we mustn't try to be efficient with officers' time, efficient with the use of the building, at the expense of coming to the right decision and debating things properly. If any of our decisions were to go to an inspector on appeal, there would very likely be a hearing, and it would last a day or several days, and there would be a great deal of speaking on both sides. We do a number of applications on one day, so we mustn't take too many shortcuts for the reasons of expedience. And that I think is all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Mear. Councillor Kirby-Green, your moment has arrived.
Thank you. So the reason I put my hand up straight away is I thought we were asking questions of Gillian at that point. Anyway, I have got a few questions. I think Councillor Barnes, Councillor Meyer and Councillor Thomas have basically covered pretty much everything. But very briefly, I'll just make a couple of points. The overwhelming one is that reducing it from 5 minutes to 3 minutes is a 2-minute saving. And you're talking about three speakers, so that's 6 minutes. So do we really think 6 minutes makes much of a difference to a planning meeting? It clearly doesn't. It clearly doesn't. Because let's face it, this is only ones where you have speakers speaking, and not all applications have speakers speaking. So that's just to my mind, a stupid argument. 6 minutes makes no difference whatsoever. The speaking, I do get the questioning. I have some sympathy with that argument because I think there are sometimes planted questions by committee members, and I think it's all. I'm not sure how much we gain from that. I agree with that. There's a comment about every speaker's biased, and I think Gillian said the only people that aren't biased are the members of the committee and the officers who don't have a view. I would disagree with that, because officers do have a view. Officers have written a report and given a recommendation. So I would suggest that they are biased. I'm not saying that's wrong, but they're clearly biased because they've come into the meeting making a recommendation to grant or approve, grant or refuse. So officers clearly have an opinion. The officer report is far too long. Completely agree. I mean, I sat in one meeting, the officer report took 35 minutes. Absolutely wrong. 100 houses. I'm really concerned because Gillian said that will be a common occurrence, apparently, under this new government. I don't think it will be a common occurrence in Etchingham or in Ticehurst or in Hurst Green. So surely there's got to be a differentiation between Bexhill and rural parishes, I would have said. I did have a question for Gillian because she made a statement right at the beginning saying the planning committee agree unanimously to all these changes. Well, I've just heard from Councillor Meyer, who's a member of the planning committee, and I don't think he agrees with them. I've spoken to other members of planning, and I don't think they agree with them. So I'd just like to understand when the committee agreed unanimously to these changes. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Green. I'll come to Gillian. I just want to say there wasn't a formal vote at the planning committee. It was a osmosis of where we express opinions. I don't think
there was a vote of support, but it wasn't a formal recommendation. It was just, but everybody voted in support. Everybody that was there voted in support of the proposal. Just to pick it up, and I'll sort of try and do it in reverse, after the last committee. I'm just trying to remember when it was that we finished committee and then we had a session with this. It was actually the 30 units I was saying was likely to be quite a common occurrence at that level of scale of application, not the 100 units, which I still think would be less common, even under this government. In terms of bias, maybe it is the term that I'm using, but it's every speaker has, whether you want to say skin in the game, they've got a view, they're coming, they want to convince, they want to come to the planning committee and convince them. If they're the neighbour, they might want it refused. If they're the applicant, they want it approved. They are coming to try and persuade you. So they have that sort of, point of view. And similarly, the parish council come with a desire to make you do, as a planning committee, to make you do what they want you to do. So that's when I'm sort of indicating that they're all biased, they all have skin in the game. In terms of the officers, yes, have formed a recommendation. So yes, by the time it gets to the committee, they have formed a recommendation on the proposal. But they are there. They start off from a position of advising the committee on within the planning decision-making framework as to what they professionally consider to be the best approach on the evidence that they have before them, and that is the evidence from the Highway Authority, the evidence from the Environment Agency, the evidence from the local residents, from the applicant. They're bringing all of that together to advise you. That is their only role. Their only role is to advise the council. And it might be that the committee or members of the committee don't agree with them, but their role is to advise the council. So therefore, from that perspective is how that I was looking at it, as they were unbiased. I think is that all the comments that were made? I probably agree with the planted questions, but I'll maybe just scoot over that.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
I think I'm bound really to test the opinion of the committee on the 3 and the 5 minute. I'm going to suggest that we do not recommend a 3-minute limit on speaking. It's the only amendment I'm going to propose tonight, but I want to propose that if I have a seconder.
you do have in Councillor Thomas, but I've just got to say I apologise, Councillor Biggs. I gather you've been trying to speak for some time and I've ignored you.
Well, I've only attended one planning meeting, and what Gillian's just said there, where officers do recommend to the planning committee. The one I attended, they was more worried about an appeal taking place and costing rather money, so they advised against the objection. That was the only one I attended, and I was quite surprised about that. The thing I'm going to bring up about the 5 minutes is the fact that a lot of council officers and councillors, it can be quite daunting to actually stand up in front of someone. And to try and do it in 3 minutes, I think you've got no chance. Members of the public, when they first stand up, could be nervous. It might take them a little while to get confident to start putting their points of view across. So the extra 2 minutes could make quite a big difference. The other one, on Appendix B, Item J, I don't know anyone in says parish or town councils where it stipulates across the boroughs boundaries. I don't know anyone that can give a view in 90 seconds. How anybody can put a constructive view in 90 seconds is beyond me. So I don't agree with that. And I agree with Councillor Barnes and Councillor Thomas that 3 minutes and 90 seconds is much too short.
So from the point of view of the committee, are you seconding Councillor Barnes's motion because Councillor Thomas can't because he's ex officio? Thank you. And just to answer your point, as a result of the review, financial implications are not now included in the officer's report, and probity of planning says that if the committee is going to go against the officer's recommendation, they should be given an opportunity to explain the possibility of an appeal and the likelihood of it going against us, etc. So in fact, I invite officers to comment on that because probity in planning says they should have the opportunity. Now I'm going to hand over to Gillian, who says I'm totally wrong. Gillian.
I just wanted to be clear on the subject of local financial considerations. That is, we're not going to going forward include SIL or new homes bonus because if it isn't directly related to the development, it isn't material to the decision making. But I think you probably covered the issue in terms of it is important that the planning officer, who is the advisor to the council as a whole, advises the planning committee if there is likely to be either costs awarded against a particular decision or approach. And the reason why that is so important, and it has been, it's in probity and planning, but it's also case law about it being perfectly reasonable and acceptable for that to take place, because if officers are commenting on costs likely to be awarded, it is because they think the decision is unreasonable and would be extremely difficult to defend. But most often officers, it does come up and they do comment on it. But sometimes in the reports it might say something like, this is a finely balanced case. Well, that tends to not mean, no, that isn't a costs one. But going against an expert like highways or environmental health do tend to result in costs of awards.
Thank you. Got Councillor Creaser online with a comment, hopefully. Councillor Creaser.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I was at the planning meeting, as I usually am, and I have to say that the things that came out of that, I really find that Gillian is a completely breath of fresh air. She tells it how it is and what we need to do, which is really good. And one of the things she did say is that we need, as planning committee members, to have organised ourselves before the event. Some folks still come to the meetings having not done that, which is a shame, but people have other pressures as well in life. What I will say is that the officers, we need to give them the confidence that we have actually read all those things. I know Councillor Barnes reads everything, and so do I. I probably don't understand it as well as you do, but I do try. But what I find is that I think we do need 5 minutes as opposed to the 3, but I do think we need to really streamline what we're doing, because at the end of the day, regardless of what people say, the law's the law, and that's what we're guided by. It's not a chat fest. It's not an opportunity to vent our spleen. It should be that we have already considered this information, which we are given a week beforehand, and then for us to then at that point, and the 2 days before we have the meeting, we go to sites and stuff like that. I think that we need to give people as members, because I mean most of us were new anyway the last intake, is to then give everybody the opportunity to get used to the fact that we're actually a learning thing. I think we've got to the point now where we're actually getting some of the right things. And Gillian has been extremely useful to me personally. I don't know about anybody else, I don't really care, to actually be a better planning committee member. So I think we need to be really sensible about this and make sure if we have a question about what's being put before us, we should ask the officers before the meeting. So when we get to the meeting, we haven't got to talk about everything. Yes, it is extremely important for members of the public to be able to join in. No problem with that at all. But at the end of the day, if their comments are not able to be justified through the planning authority and our framework, we cannot do anything about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Creaser. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gillian, for your response. And I agree that you are a breath of fresh air. We do need these kind of outspoken reports, and it's a very good one. I don't agree with some of it, but nevertheless, I think you presented a case very, very well indeed. I'd just like to, again, take up some very important points. I don't have this enormous faith in the statutory consultees, quite frankly. My experience of discussing cases behind the scenes with officers is that officers will say to me, well, I would expect highways to object, but I doubt if they will, because they very rarely do. Or I'm expecting highways to be against this, but they'll probably pull out at the last moment on some pretext. That's the sort of thing I hear behind the scenes about the statutory consultees. And so I don't think we are dealing with kind of totally impartial experts. When you set up an authority like the Highways Agency and you put in charge of it the person who previously was in charge of Heathrow Airport, I don't think you're doing that in order to have an organisation that's going to prioritise the environment over their financial considerations. So I think we've got to be quite clear that government agencies are government agencies and will be affected by government policy for good or ill. And I think it's also important to say that we will be operating soon under a very different regime, under which we will be expected to pass virtually every planning application, but with conditions. That's what's likely to be the law, so the tilted balance is going to tilt further. That may be a very good thing, because I believe in house building as well. I believe in housing people. But nevertheless, let's not pretend that we're operating one eternal objective system, because we're not. And I don't think we should refer to discussion as a chat fest. What we should be encouraging is detailed, relevant, intelligent, evidence-based discussion, taking into account the law that we have to observe. That's what we should be encouraging. And so I agree with Councillor Barnes and all the other people who say 5 minutes at least. I think that's right. I also agree with Councillor Barnes about the importance of an urban-rural split. I think we should also maybe have special rules for the AONB, because our rules should be flexible and therefore take account of conditions throughout the whole of that area. I also think we should consider very carefully maybe different rules when we're dealing with the SSI dependency levels, because then you have to do an appropriate assessment, and that brings in many more considerations than other planning applications. So I think we do need to look at this policy in a bit more depth, and I agree with some of the criticisms made, but I also agree with the idea that the system does need to be streamlined and improved. I think an awful lot could be done in terms of more training for chairs, more training for members, talking to individual members and saying, look, you know, if you agree with somebody else, why not just say, I agree, if you've got to speak, but otherwise just do it through your vote. I think an awful lot could be done behind the scenes as well. So I think that would be a approach that would also help. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. don't think we can pick our own experts, unfortunately. The government say they are the experts and they are the experts, despite personal beliefs about that. Did you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that there's often huge frustration with the comments that come from some of the experts, but they are the local planning authority, they are the Environment Agency, and to go against them is exactly when a planning officer will say, I think this will be very difficult to defend, I think it's highly likely that you would get costs awarded against you, because it is, you know, whether we like it or not, they are the experts and we must take into account their views. And it's a very difficult thing to stand up and say, I know more than the Highway Authority does about highways. Particularly when the government policy, I'll take highways as an example, government policy is that you should only refuse something on highway grounds if, you know, it is going to, you know, be a sort of extreme impact on the highway. Extreme isn't the word, but I've forgotten it right at the second. But the bar is up here, whereas actually locally the bar for everybody else, the residents and a lot of councillors, is away down here. So you've got a chasm between what the government policy says is acceptable in highway terms. So to go against the Highway Authority, for example, is always trouble and will cost a lot of money.
Thank you. I've got a question I want to put to you on this, because it's concerned me a bit. Whatever time we arrive at for the length of time for questioning, many wards have 2 members. And should we be allowing 2 members or 2 members to split the time, or should it only be 1 member from a 2-member ward? I'd like to think they could get together, but they could possibly have totally opposite views. And I wouldn't want not to have the ward councillor. But if the ward councillor is giving the views of the residents, what's the parish council representative doing? So I've got that problem. So I still want the ward councillor to come, but should we be allowing for the possibility of a double councillor ward and 2 councillors coming or sharing?
Chair, in writing this, I have 3 minutes down for ward members. And so on that basis, I would say it is that if there was 2, then like everybody else, you would split it. Now, saying that, if members are going to move for 5 minutes, so they would get 2.5 minutes each. But I think that would be appropriate. But yeah.
Thank you. I've seen your S in brackets now. So there's definitely a motion on the table to discuss to go on for 5 minutes instead of 3. If I start with that one, we could then look to see if there's any more. I don't think there is, but or I break it down to each bit of who should speak, how long should speak, should they be asked questions, and should it be bigger, more speakers for bigger, which incorporates all of Appendix B. So I'm going to start with this motion that's before us of it should be 5 minutes, not 3 minutes, moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Biggs. All those in favour, please show. This is for recommendation, of course, to full council. As chairman planning, I'm not going to. Sorry, no, I was wondering. No. Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you. So that's carried. So the recommendation to full council will be for 5 minutes. I've not heard anyone say there shouldn't be questioning. Am I right in thinking that we're happy that there should be no questioning? I haven't seen anyone. Okay. And then the only other thing that's been raised really is the large major application, which talks about in excess of 100, where you would increase the speakers for and against to 2. There was a query over, I think, trying to lower that figure or having a different figure for the national landscape or just rural areas. I'm not sure we've heard enough to actually have that as a vote, and possibly we leave that as it is and let full council decide, because obviously it's still a full council decision. Councillor Barnes, help me out. You were thinking?
I just think that out there in the sticks, and a number of parish councils have spoken to me about this, there was a horse laugh when they saw the figure of 100, because in the villages, they have never seen an application for 100 houses. The nearest you've got to it is probably her screen. And even that, I think it was 40, was the biggest I've ever seen in her screen. So, in effect, you're saying in the historic landscape, you will never get 2 speakers. You might in Bexhill. It'd be more honest to do what Gillian suggested, which is to say all applications 1, because it would at least not provoke that horse laugh. I personally think there is a case for differentiating between the historic landscape, where we have a duty, a statutory duty, to protect and enhance, and the remainder of the district. Because it does seem to me, if you have a duty to protect and enhance, it puts you in a rather difficult position if you don't actually differentiate between that and the rest of the district. But I'm not feeling very strongly about it, but I think actually either we go for all applications with only 1, or we should make a differentiation that is real.
Thank you. I'm just going to, my thoughts on that were, because even if it's 1 house in the national landscape, we've still got that responsibility to protect the national landscape. So right up until the 100, we've still got that responsibility. And I'm not sure how having another speaker takes that any further forward. So I quite like your idea of having just 1 speaker, but that seems a bit drastic when even Gillian is suggesting 2 for exceptionally large applications. I'm going to let Councillor Mears say something, even though he's not on the committee, but it's on that subject I've just raised.
Unusually, I might be questioning something which Councillor Barnes says. I would have misgivings about differentiating in terms of numbers of speakers between the rural parts, especially the AONB, and Bexhill, because I think that will make it, to people in Bexhill, that's going to make it look as if some sort of favourable treatment is being given to the rural areas. And I don't think that would be right. And I would like to put it on record now, that when I joined the planning committee, I was afraid that there would be a them and us thing with Bexhill and the rural districts. I have been very impressed by my Bexhill colleagues' fairness in dealing with rural matters, and I would like to think that we rural members have been fair to the urban districts. And we need to maintain that excellent relationship between town and country.
Thank you. Before I come to you, Councillor Barnes, I should point out that other towns are available and it's not just Bexhill. Councillor Barnes.
I was not differentiating between rural and urban. I was very specific. To my mind, what differentiates the historic landscape is not its rural character. It is because we have a very specific statutory duty to conserve and enhance it. And it's not merely about aesthetic beauty in the case of our historic landscape. It is, in fact, still a late medieval landscape, the most perfectly preserved in the whole of Western Europe. Now, that is a duty which we can't escape. There are areas, rural areas in this district which are not protected in the same way. But it does seem to me, if we're going to do a differentiation, and I deliberately haven't moved that tonight, I'm happy to let you and Gillian take it away and think about it. It seems to me that you cannot treat the historic landscape as if it were the same as the rest of the area because of that very specific statutory duty we have. I would find it much better to treat all applications the same if we are really not going to think about the historic landscape at all.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I'm going to come to Gillian as a response to that. Then it will be Mr. Farmer. Then it will be Councillor Thomas. And then Councillor Burton online. Gillian.
Chair, I would have some concerns about that because then you would say, well, what about conservation areas? And then what about this? And then what about that? And, you know, there are other that would fall into a similar category. So it would seem better to just have one category. And if there was something extraordinary going on in a particular area, whether that's in the national landscape or whether it's in a conservation area or if it's in the middle of Bexhill, that could be an exception that the chair, but I mean, I really do mean an exception that you would have more speakers. You know, if you were redeveloping the whole Bexhill town centre or something, you know, you might have something there.
And just before I come to Mr. Farmer, can I just make it clear, wherever it ever says chairman's discretion, it's always got to be in consultation with the head of planning or somebody aides, other than obviously in a meeting where it's my discretion not to call Mr. Farmer next. But very much so, if we're going to decide it's exceptional, it's for an agreement between the chair and the head of planning. It shouldn't just be one aspect of it. Sorry, Mr. Farmer.
Just a point on the bigger applications, you know, if you're talking about 30, 40, whatever it is, houses in a residential area, then it occurs to me that residents who may object to this may want to call on expertise because it's very difficult for them to come up against a big developer. And I think then at least if there is more than one, they have the ability to call on some expertise and put that person forward to make their case. So I think there is an argument for having more than one where you've got that sort of development. Just a point of view.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I think I'm very persuaded, actually, by the argument made by Councillor Mayor and by Gillian, that to make a distinction would be invidious. I think that is right. But I also, because of my basic position that I want to maximise the amount of input into the committee, there's very little difference between the larger and the smaller. It's only a matter of minutes. So why not simply abolish the distinction and treat every application as if it were a large major application? And then that would deal with all the cases where, for one reason or another, a particular application needs more discussion time than another. I think the logical answer to that is simply go make it one, and we have the numbers specified for large major application. What would other members of the committee think about that solution to the dilemma?
Revolutionary, isn't it?
In some ways, Chairman, although it puts more onus on you and the head of planning, the discretion is actually a more sensitive instrument for getting to, because you will know which ones have aroused unusual passions. I can think of places in Bexhill, this square is one, where you might get a really passionate crusade in favour of conservation. And so, in some ways, chairman's discretion is possibly a more sensitive way of approaching it.
Yeah, I'm coming to that way of thinking, actually, from what Councillor Thomas was saying then as well, of actually it's more, even a 10 housing application somewhere could be very controversial and very, as opposed to the 200 that just nobody bats an eyelid over. You know, it's so perhaps there is something to be said for the one level with chairman's discretion with head of planning. Councillor McGurk, I've seen you. I'm just going to Councillor Burton because I did say I'd go to her next. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Drayson, our Chair, raised the point about should ward councillors, where there are two, have equal rights, or should the time be combined together. And I'm a ward councillor in North Battle, where there are two of us. And the reason there are two of us is because of the number of residents, i.e. all residents that can have their points of view and contact one or both of us. So I don't support the idea that that the time should be shared between the two councillors, because there can be different points of view valid by the number of residents who contact us. And in what has actually happened in practice is that with myself and my fellow ward councillor, Councillor Field, we have worked together and not needed to repeat ourselves or have opposing views. But I don't think that possibility should be taken away from the reflections of the committee and their decision. So I tried to think, well, should we each have 3 minutes? Is that the way around it? But I come back to the fact that it's the number of residents who can contact a councillor, and that those views should be presented to the planning committee. So I would view that each of the ward councillors should still have the possibility of 5 minutes each if needed.
Thank you. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, I mean, with respect, this feels less like an audit committee than a sort of task and finish group of the planning committee at the moment. And, we're going round and round on the tiniest of details of this report. And I wonder if it's more fitting for this to go back to planning. I mean, I don't know what sort of discussion you discussed at the planning committee, but then for it to come back to audit, maybe it would be a good idea for some suggestions from planning to come to audit rather than from planning committee to come to audit.
I think,
or some kind of task and finish group to look at this, or else it feels like there's a lot of detail going on here.
It's funny, you took the point I did here earlier, that of course this is only a recommendation to full council. And a change of one recommendation for 3 minutes to 5 minutes. I'm getting the feeling that we're going to leave in large major applications in excess of 100 for full council to decide. They will have heard these discussions. That will be reflected in the report that goes to them. So I'm getting, and I'm ready to be shot down, I'm getting the feeling that we accept the system in Appendix B, except we want 5 minutes and not 3. Am I totally wrong in that? That's what people said. Yeah, okay. So there is another part of this, of course, which I know Councillor Barnes referred to and Gillian has, which is the second part about the management of the meeting and restricting members to speaking only once a motion has been moved. Other than Councillor Barnes, I've not heard anyone express an opinion. Has anyone got an opinion on that one? Agreed? Yeah, okay. So, one moment. Oh, right. So, I need a proposer and a seconder for what I've just said, which is adopting B, except for the 5 minutes. So I need a proposer and a seconder. Propose, thank you. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Delaney. So all those in favour of that going forward to full council, please show. Thank you. So that was, oh, sorry. Sorry, did you not, sorry, you didn't have time to get, sorry, all those in favour show again, sorry, didn't follow my own advice. Thank you. I have seen you, Councillor Kirby-Green. I shall come to you shortly. So that was recommendation to Council that Appendix B be approved and adopted with that alteration. 2, thereafter the Head of Planning be granted delegated authority in consultation with the Chair of Planning to agree any minor changes to the public speaking and or the Guide to Public Speaking in Part 3 of the Constitution. Just confirming that is if those changes above are adopted. It's not giving us carte blanche to change all the public speaking scheme. It is only those that we're agreeing to or that full council agree to. Yeah? Everyone, do I need to propose? Yeah, I will do. Yeah, okay. So I need a proposer, sorry, and a seconder for that bit that we grant the Head of Planning delegated authority. Councillor Gray, thank you. Anyone seconding? Councillor Barnes, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Do you want against or? Unanimous, thank you. Section Part 3, recommendation that the relevant sections of the Council's Constitution and relevant guides to the scheme be amended accordingly. I'll take these two together because they go together. And the proposed changes to the Management Planning Committee, no, they don't go together. So the relevant section of the Council's Constitution and relevant guides to the scheme be amended accordingly. Can I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor McGurk, and seconded by Councillor Gray. All those in favour? Thank you. And part 4 of the recommendation is that the proposed changes to the management of planning committee meetings in respect to the rules of debate contained within the council procedure rules be noted. That is the one speech once the motion has been moved. Can I have a proposal for that, please? Councillor Gray, thank you. Councillor McGurk, seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. And I realise now that Councillor Kirby-Green is going to say, you were wrong to do all that. You should have heard me first. Councillor Kirby-Green.
Well, I was going to talk about the reference to members only being able to speak once after the motion's been moved. I really think a lot of new, lucky Councillor McGurk, having never been to a planning committee, I seem to go to quite a few of them, and I think there's quite often new stuff is suddenly brought up after, not new stuff as in it shouldn't be brought up, but sort of someone suddenly says something, it's like, oh, actually, that's quite a good point. And I think it really should be up to the chairman, because you might have, so person A might have spoken, then person B might say something, and then sometimes people just repeat what the other people have said. So I get that. I don't think you should be able to just repeat so you might have a new person speaking for the first time who's just repeating what already been said, but then you might have another person that's actually got something relevant and actually should be able to speak, but they can't speak because they've already spoken. So I do think, because it's not quite like council, it's not quite like a council debate. Planning is slightly different, I feel, and quite often a point is raised. I mean, I'm going to use Councillor Barnes as an example. He does come back quite a lot, but it's not generally to make the same point. It's because he's got another point to make in response to someone else. So I don't think that's particularly democratic, personally, saying you've spoken, you can't speak again. I think it'd be much better if it was up to the chairman, and if the chairman thinks the person's just repeating themselves, absolutely, they shouldn't be able to speak. So I struggle. I don't think that's particularly democratic, and I think it's a way of trying to curtail the planning committee. And I think all these measures really are trying to get stuff through, trying to sort of stop the public speaking, trying to contain the committee as far as possible. And wouldn't life be a lot easier if we didn't have members of public or planning members? That's how I feel this is approached from. And I just think that one in particular, the other things have gone through, but I do struggle with that one. But it's obviously up to full council now, because you've agreed that.
I was going to say,
they're my thoughts.
I was going to say thank you. You will. I was going to say you're free to. You will no doubt repeat that at full council. Thank you, Councillor Barnes.
Yes, somebody who's chaired an awful lot of meetings in his time. I think there is a difference once a motion is moved. I think at that point you want to have a succinct debate and then dispose of that motion. But there is a corollary to that, and it's twofold. One is, I think the chairman must not put the motion before the committee too early, because there is a deliberative stage which people are volunteering points, and the ebb and flow of discussion matters. So it seems to me it puts quite an onus on the chairman to say, I'm not going to accept a motion at this time. The other area which I think we might clear up is we got ourselves into a very awkward situation where we rejected one motion and immediately accepted another on the trot. And I think, again, there should be a convention that no motion is moved without debate, because it seems to me that is also procedurally inappropriate.
No, I apologise for that one.
I'm not critical, but it seems to me if we're writing guidance for chairs, those 2 points are important.
No, very much. You pointed it to me after that meeting, and I did apologise for that. And in my notes for planning, I've got a big "do not move on automatically to another vote." But yes, thank you, Councillor Mear. I'm going to wind up with you. I think you had a comment to make.
Yes, Chair. In fact, you and Councillor Barnes, between you, have covered the point and answered my question. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Then we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gillian. Yeah. Right, agenda item 6, which is a budget saving initiatives requiring constitutional changes to the democratic structure and processes. So this is to consider a number of changes to the democratic structure and processes in order to achieve budget savings from 25-26. And this is Lorna.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, these are proposals that came forward from Lisa Cooper in relation to democratic services. There was a meeting of group leaders that went through some of these savings, and what we see here is the output from that meeting. And as you mentioned, Chair, they will require constitutional changes. It is about saving money, but I think it's also about working more effectively and efficiently, and it has the added benefits of thinking about reducing our carbon emissions, and thinking about the welfare, really, of staff and our members too. We've had quite a few meetings lately that have been quite short, and I think that probably tells us that some change is needed. I'll quickly go through some of what the major changes are being proposed. So the first one is to reduce the number of formal committee meetings and the number held during the evening. So the recommendations here are that our Cabinet is actually scheduled every 6 weeks and would meet 9 times a year. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee be scheduled to meet 6 times a year, with 2 informal meetings held over Microsoft Teams. And at the start of each civic year, following the Appointments Committee, the membership of each committee considers whether it's possible to meet during the day and agreeing the time of day that best suits the membership. So that's the first set of recommendations. The report then goes on to look at a reduction in the number of members appointed to committees, and the recommendation here relates to members appointed to Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the Licensing and General Purposes Committee be reduced from 12 to 10. And then the next recommendations concern an amendment to mileage claimed. And the proposal here has a bit more to it. The proposal is that members on the committee would have a right to claim travelling expenses to the town hall. However, those members that might come to observe would not. Mileage for other duties such as attending outside bodies is covered, and undertaking civic roles too. So there are some exceptions to this. Firstly, as we've just been discussing, non-committee board members, a planning committee, if they're representing the views of residents, and also in relation to attendance at a meeting when there's a confidential item. You'll be aware that we've got a report coming through to Council in December that members will no longer be permitted to attend remotely to hear and contribute to the debate on confidential items. So we've already got a change being proposed there. So I think that is the main thrust of the recommendations. I think, Chair, this is obviously recommended to full council, and what I've covered there is covered in recommendations 1 to 5, and just to add that the Chief Executive be authorised to make any necessary amendments to the Constitution in consultation with the MO. So I think that's about it.
Thank you. Just before I open into questions, it was just, I know I had the question, so did somebody else. I just want to make it clear that the 2 informal meetings proposed here for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on MS Teams would be private. They're not public because the government haven't yet said anything about hybrid meetings. Should they ever become officially hybrid meetings, then those 2 would become, I suspect, hybrid meetings. But it's just they would be just the committee, they won't be public. So it was Councillor Barnes. It's not a paragraph. Thank you. Councillor McGirt.
Thanks, Chair. I'm concerned about the proposal to only allow travel expenses for members of committee. I understand the need for, obviously for savings, we all do. But I think, for instance, tonight, Councillor Mee has attended this. He's not a member of Audit Committee, but his contribution has been, really central to the discussion. And I think, we don't often have that many members of, I don't think we have that many members attending who aren't a member of the committee. Like tonight, most people have attended remotely. Coming from Rye, obviously, that's going to be an issue, particularly for people who are on a lower wage. I've never claimed travel expenses. That's just because of laziness. It's not a moral stance. But if I wouldn't want to see members who are on a lower wage or on benefits prevented from attending committees when they wanted to because they wouldn't be able to claim expenses. So I think that's a really important issue for me.
Yes, Lorna.
Well, of course, they can attend online, as we have this evening. So I suppose that's the counter to that, but I take your point.
Anybody else? Councillor? Yeah, I've seen Councillor.
Yeah, sorry, Emily. I was only going to say what Lorna's just said. I mean, I've attended remotely. So, I mean, we're not being sort of, excluded from the meeting. We just do it remotely. And if it means that, we're not claiming expenses, I don't think that's a bad thing. So I don't think that I've been any less able to get, you might not agree with what I've said, but I don't think I've been any less able to get my point across than Andrew has.
Thank you, except of course I left you a little bit long on one of them. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. I'm very aware of being in a minority of one on this, but I am, and so there it is. I think the most important thing that a local authority does is it's governed democratically. I think that's the single most important thing that it does. And I think the role of members is absolutely key. It's our job to dig, to question, to hold to account, to praise and thank, and to send and appreciate as well, and also to prioritise and to strategise. And on those grounds, I think it would be a mistake, either to reduce the number of committees or to reduce the number of people on a committee, with the exception of the Planning Committee, where I think a very good case has been made by Gillian and others. And so I would oppose those measures. I would be in favour of as much input by democratic members as can possibly be managed. This council has got a limited life. In the time before the government puts an end to its existence, which I think is unfortunately likely because I'm a defender of district councils. I believe they fulfil a useful and indispensable function. But in the remaining time, I think we should actually uphold that tradition of democracy to the utmost extent that we can. You've only got to look at this morning's standard committee and look at this evening's meeting to see the difference. When you cut down the size of the committee, you cut down the amount of democratic input. And so for that reason, I will be against. I won't speak again because I think you've heard plenty enough from me, but that is the principle on which I would be deciding about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes, and then did you want to speak, Councillor Mear? Councillor Barnes.
Yes, if our meetings were not able to be attended online, I think the points that have been made by Councillor Thomas and the one about, I'm very sympathetic to young members who haven't got the savings that us oldies have got. But being online is now an effective way of contributing, and you don't actually have a vote by attending committee. So I'm not altogether sure that I buy the argument. I'm rather with Councillor Kirby-Green. What I would suggest is we give this a trial rather than simply move once and for all to the new system. It seems to me this is a perfectly proper one, which we might run for, say, eight months to see whether people were adversely affected, and ask people to confidentially let Lorna know if there are problems with the new system. It would seem to me that's a sensible way of moving forward.
Just give a thinking time.
I just wonder whether, because we're bringing these in the new civic year, whether we let it run for that civic year and get comments back, just in terms of making sure it's working and just the neatness, really.
Right. Councillor Mear, sorry, you wanted to say something.
Chair, yes. I'm the chair of the licensing committee. And there's a proposal to reduce the size of that from 12 to 10, I think. I don't have any objection to that so far as the actual committee meeting is concerned. I'm just a little concerned that officers may find it difficult to get a licensing panel together out of the smaller number. And as long as officers will know better than I how difficult that can be. So as long as officers are content, they think they can do it, then I'm not too worried. But if they are worried, then I'm worried. That's the first thing. And the mileage matter. Yes, I am here tonight. I've had an interest in several items on the agenda. I think Councillor Kirby-Green made her point very well. She was very effective over the system. She did it very well. I think I might have done it less well. And there is also a human side to, particularly for rural members, sometimes to come and meet their colleagues. It can get very isolating and very, very lonely out in the sticks on your own. And being able to talk to other people is important. And again, I wouldn't want to see rural members being seen to be disadvantaged as against urban members or Bexhill members who can just walk round the corner. The amount of money involved must be absolutely minuscule. I think I did make an inquiry. I can't remember how much it was, but it's a tiny amount of money because very few of us come out on a dark night, for half hour, 3/4 of an hour drive out of choice. There's usually a good reason for it. And I think I'm right in saying that it's been agreed that the lawyer advising the planning committee should attend in person and not remotely. So there must seem to be some advantages of the personal attendance at a meeting.
Yes, something.
I think we are comfortable with the reduction of 12 to 10. I don't think Lisa would have proposed it. She is online if she disagrees with me. In the case of a lawyer being present, I mean, they do have the job of not just contributing to the meeting, but sort of managing the meeting along with the chair. So I think that's slightly different kind of contribution to a meeting. And the point you made about, I can't really comment on how you feel about, that as a rural member. That's your point of view. And I do understand where you're coming from, but I suppose there are, we do lots of training, lots of other ways of engaging, and I suppose, that's your personal view there. So I respect that.
Can I say that there's training for planning in the new year that's in the town hall and must be attended in the town hall, so presumably that would be covered. But I wonder, and it's only just struck me tonight, and you're going to hate me for it, but it is to put a figure on it, because it must be a low figure. There are lots of members who do not come to committees and don't travel in and do watch online. I mean, there's more tonight online, which is a great facility, of course. So I wondered if it's possible, depending on, I know we'll go for a vote in a moment on the whole recommendations, but I wonder if it's possible before full council to actually have the figure that's likely to be saved by not paying, or what the mileage is now and what it's likely to be, because I suspect it's not a lot. Sorry? Oh, Lisa is going to tell me off.
Hello, Chair. Just to say that I did look at some figures after I'd had a contact from Councillor Meir, who raised his concern with me. And yes, we are talking a small amount of money. I looked at the members who travelled to the cabinet meetings and the scrutiny meetings from the beginning of the year until early November, and it would be a saving of around just under £200, but that was only looking at those two committees. So there would be savings, but they would be small, and we totally acknowledge that we're not talking big money here, but every little helps. And just to comment on the numbers on the panels, going from 12 to 10 members on LNGP isn't a problem, because as Louise will testify, out of those 12 members, there's probably just a small hardcore group of members who actually do the panels. So going down to 10 is not an issue.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnes.
I fear I didn't hear Lisa's last comment, so this remark may be redundant. But if there were reserve members for the licensing committee, they would be trained and therefore would be eligible for panels.
No, the substitute members are not eligible for panels. We can only take panel members from the committee, from substantive members of the committee.
Thank you. I was going to take all 6 recommendations as sort of one, but I suspect somebody might want to suggest that one we don't do. Or do I go down them one at a time, just for clarity, if people are ready to move and second, right. So, recommendation 1, Cabinet be scheduled to meet every 6 weeks, that's 9 times a year. Can we have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Gray. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Item 2, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee be scheduled to meet 8 times a year, with 2 of them being informal meetings held over MS Teams. Can I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Gray. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous.
Thank you. We're going to get to one in a minute. Number 3, at the start of each civic year following the appointments to committees, the membership of each committee considers whether it is possible to meet during the day and agree the time of the day that best suits the membership. I have a mover for that, Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor McGurk. All those in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Number 4, that the number of members appointed to the Overview and Scrutiny and Licensing General Purposes Committees be reduced from 12 to 10. Have a mover, please. Councillor Gray, well done. I will stare at you. Councillor McGurk, thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. No.
No, not unanimous.
No.
No, sorry.
No. Hang on, don't worry. Got them? No.
Did Councillor Barnes? No, did
No,
he?
no. No.
Was that a hand up?
Is that 4? Yes.
Oh, sorry, we couldn't see
Thank you.
one.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Those,
6, 4, 5, 6.
those against? Those abstaining? Thank you, that's 1. That's carried. Thank you. Number 5. The policy in relation to the payment of travel expenses to attend formal committee meetings be amended as outlined in paragraphs 19 to 24 of the report. Do I have anyone who wants to move that, please?
Can we subject that to review after a given period? Because I really would want to reflect on the experience. But I'm happy to go with the recommendation. But it seems to me that this is one which could prove sensitive, and it might be sensible to set a review date to confirm that we are still happy with it.
I take your point, and I'll come to Laura on that. I had a feeling that it was going to be rejected, but that would still mean we could still put in the review date. So I'll ask Councillor, I'll ask someone else to move that the policy in relation to the payment of travel expenses to attend formal committee meetings be amended as outlined in paragraphs 19 to 24 of the report, with a review after 1 year?
1 year.
1 year. Anyone want to move that one? You're Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Gray. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. And last but not least, number 6, the Chief Executive be authorised to make the necessary amendments to the Constitution, obviously relating to above, not the whole Constitution, in consultation with the monitoring officer. Can I have a mover for that one, please? Thank you, Councillor Gray. And a seconder? Councillor Delaney, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's carried unanimously.
Yeah.
Right, that's the end of that agenda item. Agenda item 7, which is to recommend to Council approval of a protocol for hybrid meetings of general licensing panels. So this is not the committee, this is the panels. Who's introducing this? Lorna.
It's Richard Parker Harding.
Sorry, Richard Parker Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this matter came up as part of a decision in the High Court decision, which considered whether or not licensing panels, which come under the Licensing Act 2003, could be held remotely. And the court's decision was that that could be held remotely, provided the council had adopted a protocol as to how such meetings would be conducted. The appendix to your report shows the protocol which we have developed. The idea really being that it wouldn't be the norm that we would have any meetings, any licensing panels which would be hybrid, but that it's an opportunity in two cases. First of all, the licensing hearing regulations are very specific as to when a licensing hearing is to be held. And the problem which we have from time to time is that in order to adjourn a hearing, you actually have to meet in order to adjourn it. And therefore, it will be very useful to be able to have a hybrid meeting, which will allow us to have the meeting remotely and then agree to adjourn it. And the second possibility is where someone who wants to make a representation to the panel but cannot attend for some reason in person, and therefore there needs to be the ability for that person to attend remotely, provided there are no objections. And if there were objections, then the protocol sets out that consultation between the appropriate officer, which would normally be myself, and the chair of the Licensing and General Purposes Committee would decide whether or not it's appropriate for that person to attend remotely. And that's my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Parker Harding on this one? I think it's very much a required piece of ammunition on our constitution. So can I have someone to move then that we recommend to full council that the hybrid licensing panel meeting protocol Appendix A be approved and adopted and form part of the council's constitution? Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Gray, why not? Can I have a seconder, looking at this side of the room? No. Can I have a seconder for that one? Councillor Pierce, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Did I think we'd finish by 9? Right, that brings us to the work programme for future meetings, and members to note please that there's an additional meeting in January. Grant Thornton, our external auditors, weren't in a position, well, nor were we, I don't think we were. It's very much a partnership. They weren't in a position to present their findings tonight, so we've got an additional meeting on Monday the 27th of January, mainly to deal with the Grant Thornton findings and also the Treasury Management update on that. And then they are pretty much, Monday is on the list there, and then the next one will of course be a new committee, or a new civic year anyway. So, sorry, Councillor Barnes, sorry.
Yes, you do need to amend the 21st of July next year. It won't be Audit and Standards Committee annual report, it will just be Audit Committee annual report.
As Councillor Creaser commented earlier, he reads everything. Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Yes, unless I suppose the new committee, after the beginning of the civic year, decide it's 8:30 in the morning.
The other thing that isn't mentioned, and I can understand why, is the meetings when we're going to look more formally at the risk register. It's there, I think, on the 9th of June, but then we go all the way through on those meetings. And I thought we were going to only take them every other meeting.
Yeah, I mean, it is there on the 24th of March. Then, as you say, it is listed on June, July, September. We probably need to take alternate ones of those out. So if Anna could liaise with Louise and fit that in so that it's every other. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barnes, for spotting that. Right, okay, with that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. The next meeting, as I said, is on the 27th of January. Thank you to everyone for your contributions. Thank you, Councillor Mear, and those online. Councillor Kirby Green, I think, is gone, but thank you. And good night.